All right, folks, welcome to the Green Pill Mini Podcast. Today, your guest is Susan Swartz, PhD. She's practicing in Arizona. She's a Jungian Analytical psychologist. Having been educated in Switzerland, in Zurich specifically, Susan's written a few books which are really quite interesting, even by their title. Most recently, The Absent Father Effect on Daughters, Father Desire, Father Wounds, and we'll get into that. The Imposter Syndrome and the As-If Personality in Analytical Psychology, The Fragility of the Self. And the third book, worth mentioning, although there are others, Archetype of Puella, The Feminine Unfolding.
Yes.
So, thank you, Susan. Welcome. We're excited to have you. Folks are really excited to hear from you. What are we going to talk about today?
Well, let's talk about the red thread that goes between all of the books, and that is the development of oneself. Meaning, in Jungian psychology, being your absolute who you are, your individual self, not a self that is disconnected from culture or from the world, but a self that is solid and connected to the world and with the world, but coming from not being afraid to be who one is. So you have to have a strong enough sense of ego, like I, but also access to all those different parts of your personality. Masculine, feminine, in, out, mother, father, and everything in between, including the parts that are not so gorgeous. So it's a matter of showing and being and revealing your humanness. It takes a lot of guts, in a way, to be oneself. Really yourself, not the following through on, I was told to do 7 things, but more, I am evolving into who I really am inside and what I want my trajectory to be. It would be parallel to, like, why you do these interviews, podcasts, YouTubes. It's like showing an idea of the world that resonates for you and with another person, and then other people get to pick and choose from it. It's quite complex and simple at the same time.
And so we're talking in a way for folks listening about not just self-actualization, but self-discovery and then actualization, right?
Yes, and the ways that you find it are the self-actualization is the union of conscious and unconscious worlds. And you do that through dreams, meaningful symbols in your life, events also that are quite meaningful, as well as, again, relationships with yourself and with others. So what the world brings to you, consciously and unconsciously, the question is, what are you going to make of it? How will you make sense out of what has happened to you in your life? Like, how will you make meaning out of suffering? Not just that you suffer, but there is a meaning about your development that is very important inside of it all.
And so in the process of, if we stick with my very high level 2 summaries of self-discovery and your addition of making meaning of experience, and then once meaning is made or as meaning is made, one then can continue becoming their full self. As you mentioned, instead of checking the 7 boxes of kids, family, house, whatever's expected in that person's life, instead of checking those 7 boxes, it's evaluating what happened to yourself and setting some meaning for it. And the tools you use, just if I may, the tools you use, dreams, analysis of symbols, conscious experiences, perhaps unconscious, or not perhaps unconscious experiences we're feeling. So where do you, it seems like maybe for the listener, maybe just for me, a lot to think about. It seems like you don't exclude certain categories, whereas CBT might say, okay, or cognitive behavioral therapy, it's only in our mind. You have other therapies only in our heart. It sounds like you're taking the full gamut.
Yeah, because you're absolutely right. The full gamut, meaning your mind, your body, and your soul. So many people come in, they have a body symptom, whatever it is. But that symptom physically also means something psychologically, and or will reflect back on their personal or collective history. So it's not just a random thing that has happened to them. It is transgenerational, perhaps. It is something that so and so in the past did not take care of. And so unconsciously, it seeps into the system. And maybe the third to the fourth generation is the one who's going to figure it out. So in other words, what I'm saying is it's more complex than CBT and takes into the many layers of life and therefore makes it very exciting. So the discovery of oneself should be ongoing, bringing together always, however we can, the conscious and unconscious. Dreams are a very easy way to do it. Relationships are great as well, because the amount of times that we say, you did this. No, that probably is not what happened. You did that. But the question is, why was I reacting the way I did? And how can I learn from it? It's an approach which is to unite the different pieces of oneself, not divide, unite, accept, do what you can, and try to remain conscious throughout your life. So if you get those 7 things, house, kids, position, whatever, it's great. But what is there really that's going to answer your inside being, your personal fulfillment? Is it going to be enough to check the boxes? And for some people, it isn't, because they have a quest to find out more about what it is to be themselves.
They are on such a quest, or it is not?
They are on a quest. It is like why one takes a trip. You take a trip. It's a psychological trip or an actual trip. You take a trip really to expand your world, to learn about aspects of life that you don't know yet, to be able to challenge your being. It's called pushing the envelope.
I see.
Yeah.
And I, of course, can relate with my recent long trip, which you're alluding to Africa. And do you find that in your work, folks ever check the box, or is that a false notion, even if the box is a box that they really want to check?
If you want to check the box, do it. But it's not so easy, because then you have to ask yourself, what are the obstacles to checking that box? So in Jungian psychology, we'd call it the shadow. You would say, what is it that I don't know about myself? These can be wonderful things. They can be things you're trying to hide from. But also the point of Jungian psychology, again, is bringing all these pieces together, not pathologizing. But it's not pathologizing. It's saying, how do they fit? How do they fit? So you want to check boxes, but you want them to be meaningful boxes, not just because somebody told you.
So it almost sounds like one of the biggest results that someone coming to see you would have is finding meaning, or at least getting closer to it.
I think what you just said at the end, getting closer to it, because it does bring up the question, do we ever really answer the deal? And maybe we don't need to. Maybe the point is that we are asking the questions that are really on deeper levels of life, and we're requiring of our lives to be meaningful, not just to be empty or just watching the game just to watch the game. And that can be the game of life. So there's a lot of people who are not really participating. They're observing.
And do they find meaning from observing? Again, if it's this asymptote that you never reach, let's just say, does it feel meaningful to them to observe? You do see those people who are more driven, more active. I happen to self-identify as one of them. And then you have the people who are more passive and a little less ambitious. Are we talking about ambition here, or we're not talking about ambition?
No, I think ambition is an energy from within that is searching for not just meaning, for purpose. There's some things, some people are born with that chip inside. It's more driven than others. The observer that I'm talking about is the one who's too removed from the intensity of what it is to be a person. You can see it in addiction. Any kind of addiction is like a wall between oneself and others. The issue of understanding oneself is to get closer, not only to yourself, but to others. If you're observing, you're not living close to the bone. And so you're detracting from your own intensity for many reasons. So I'm not saying that everyone should turn out the same. That is not the point of analysis. The point is find out who you are and live that way.
And by living that way, by living closer to a meaningful life than you were before, if we can just take the before and after, you will feel better. You will feel more alive, at least.
You'll feel more alive. Better is such an interesting term. It doesn't mean that you get cured. It doesn't mean that you necessarily get ecstatically happy. But it does mean that you are finding your balance, your purpose, your foundation, what is important to you. It's like finding the food that fits for you. It's the same thing. How do you nourish yourself? With food, with exercise, how do you balance your life? How do you listen to your mind, body, and soul? And how do you listen to the parts of yourself which are too vacant, have not been addressed, are absent spaces? How do you pay attention to them? Because they're the ones that send people into any kind of therapy, because they create unease inside.
And so this feeling of completeness, which you're touching on, it almost makes me think of a pie chart where, let's say there's the pie chart's divided into fifths, and 1/5 might be spirituality, 1/5 might be relationships, and you could fill in the other 3/5. Is it something like that, where folks are ignoring part of their spirituality or their health, or it's much deeper, right? I mean, they might be ignoring their entire family tradition and whatever they were raised in. It's just so much for them, they keep it empty. Maybe you give us some examples of some of the emptiness that people face that drives them to seek help because it's unease.
You just mentioned several. One of the interesting things about Jungian psychology is the attention to spirituality, not religion, but the spirit inside, and the spirituality in the world, you could say. Those kind of non-verbal, very meaningful and powerful connections that bring a sense of spirit. It's like you watch the sunset and it's an amazing spiritual experience. But you have to be alive inside also to appreciate it. I think sadly, a lot of people walk around half dead, and they are in their pie chart. They don't even notice what they're missing because they're so missing it. And what will happen is one of those slices of the pie chart will start to get bigger, and it will cause symptoms of distress or depression, anxiety, addictions. It'll cause something. And that will be helpful because it will push that person into finding themselves. So the way that you described it, these missing pieces, you could say spirituality, you could say mind, body, soul, you could say attention in a healthy way to oneself that involves others. Some people, quite difficultly, their family traditions are not what they can follow. It's off. It doesn't mean that, it means that won't work for them. And so they are set on the path to find out who they are because the traditions don't work. Equally, for some people, the traditions do work, but another part of the pie chart does not.
And so Jung and his disciples and his students and folks that you've learned from believe that the human animal is constantly on a search for meaning, and it's a forward-looking, it's not just a forward look, it's forward-looking in the sense of feeling differently, feeling more meaning, but it's also backward-looking up to 3, 4, maybe more generations, sideways looking, depth, volume, what I like, I'm hearing what I like and what I don't hear often when I speak to other psychologists is this ability to take a 360 or even a 4, 5, 7, 10 dimensional view and not ignore any of it.
Exactly. You totally have it. So if we use your examples, which are great, this kind of 360, the circle is actually a symbol, ages old, of wholeness, completion, the mother. We could go on and on because it is important. It's a holding symbol. It holds. Mm-hmm. So when people have a circle in a dream, I will often say, wow, that might be something that's trying to contain chaos, making order for you, holding your personality together.
And so that's an example of a symbol that appears in a dream, which serves as a tool for you to open up a dialogue with someone or for them to open up with you.
Yes. And let me also say,
please,
you use that important word with, because analysis is a with place. It is not me telling somebody, do this, X, Y, and Z, or even your symbol means this and this. We work it together, and in the space between us, something else happens. This is very typical of Jungian psychology. Jung calls it a transcendent function. It's quite interesting. It happens to all of us. This person comes together and there is a new spark. You can feel it with it's even in our interview. So there's me and there's you, and there's all the material that evolves between. And it's a recognition that it's together that makes something happen.
And so when folks come to you, of course you're not their friend in the role sense. You may be put on the friend hat at times, but you are their counselor, you might say therapist, their analyst would probably be a word you would use even more than the prior two. Yes. Does that role ever shift for you because you're co-creating so much, you're getting so involved in getting them to know them so well? So you're to me sometimes the word analyst, and it might be biased by my finance background, means someone who digs in and looks and draws conclusions, but then doesn't make recommendations always, right? Because it's not the analyst's job always to recommend. How do you see that? Like, how do you see the question of evaluating versus prescribing? And I think I know the answer.
Yes, you already do know the answer. But I will say, for myself, I am quite active in participating with people. I will give my ideas, but I will give my ideas after that person has shared theirs. And then together, we will come up with not necessarily recommendations, but what is the feeling here? What is the emotion telling you to do? How do you feel you want to proceed or not? Sometimes it's important to just stick with a situation, even if it is very difficult, and just stay with it, knowing, so you see there's the tricky thing, knowing that the analyst is with that person, not friend, but with, carried in the mind.
Nice.
Somebody is thoughtful about you, remembers about you, is participating with you, not for you.
Not for you. They're not bolstering you up. They're not holding you. They're not coddling. They're not chit-chatting.
No, it's very serious. And as you say, not coddling or not being very clear, even about difficult material. Like, do you want to face the fact that you're really involved here? You're not an innocent standing around. A rotten thing is happening for some reasons. Let's figure out what's going on.
And so you're quite frank with people, and I think, of course, with delicacy, and I can tell just by knowing you a bit that you have a way of communicating with people where it's non-threatening, and yet maybe someone deciding between an analyst and more traditional CBTs, like, or even not CBT, but I guess the other version of talk therapy, which is much more soft and not so goal-oriented. And someone might say, well, if I get involved with an analyst, I'm going to face this stuff. And if I go to somebody who is more about the local day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, we might get deep, but we might get coddled a little bit, and I like that better. Yeah. With you, how do you make people feel comfortable in such sometimes tough, deep conversations?
But isn't that where you find comfort? Because you know you're not alone in the tough, deep conversation, and you know it's going to be addressed as well. Because if you think about it, if I would collude with somebody and not talk the real basic issues, that reinforces they must be bad, really bad. Oh my gosh. And many people carry around, I know I'm flawed. And if you really knew me, you would also know I am flawed. I can't tell you the amount of people who sit here, because I'm in my office, who sit here and say, I'm a fraud, and I'm flawed. And so I have to cover the flaw with a glitzy, I look okay demeanor. I don't tell anybody how bad I feel. I don't tell anyone how lonely I am. And so to be able to say that opens it up. And then you don't have to hold on to fraudulence, feeling badly about yourself, and flawed. Because when you have to do that, you have to put on so much armor to go out in the world. It's just too heavy. It's too much.
And that heaviness being physical, mental, emotional, right?
Yes.
If we want to use those categories.
Absolutely.
May I jump from the physical? Take heaviness, for example, the armor metaphor, which I love. So you think about chainmail, you think about heavy iron that knights and soldiers used to wear going into battle. So walking out your front door in New Jersey or Ohio or Arizona, and you're carrying all this armor, and there's mental armor, right? There's heart armor, there's aura armor. I'm not sure how helpful mental mind-body separation is in any case. So when people how do people diffuse the armor? By acknowledging it, to someone, which is, and
yeah. Go ahead.
How do they? Because that heaviness I find manifests in so many psychosomatic stomach, neck, shoulders. As a health coach, I see it a lot in myself. That's so powerful. Do you have any tools out there for people listening, if they could do this themselves, and also they should go see you? What is a few first steps you recommend to folks who talk to you at cocktail parties? If I may jump there. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I tell people at cocktail parties. They might or might not want to listen.
Hear it, yeah.
Yeah. On the other hand, I would say that when somebody talks about a symptom, I take it quite seriously. Like, what does it symbolize? What does it symbolize? So if it's in your stomach, why? Did you used to have stomach aches? What's going on? Did something happen that made you want to throw up? Are you not throwing? You can talk about it in many different ways. The other thing that's very easy is if you remember your dreams. Because, how you appear in your dreams, also physically, is going to tell you a great deal. Some people appear in their dreams with absolutely no armor on, as in they're naked. Okay, what does that mean? Usually you're not ready. If you're going to go out the door and you're naked, they don't allow it in this world. So you're not ready to go out. And so listen to that. What do you need? Why do you feel too exposed? You see this, the symbol in the dream opens to so much, and dreams are just easy. You just tell yourself, I want to remember them. You also, the symptoms and the problems and the issues come up in relationships.
So you see that in dreams and, of course, relationships.
And in relationships, somebody will say to you, you know what, this is really off. Okay, let's talk about it. Why do you consider it off? And those are very good learning places. Work is another learning place. I'm not doing well at work. But why? Are you in the right place? Do you need to leave? Do you need to stay? Do you have enough? You said it earlier, this drive and push. Do you have some motivation? And where is your enthusiasm? So you can see that you can take anything in your life and use it to go into yourself more. But the key is, and you can also journal. You can journal. You can talk into your phone all the time. And when you're driving, you can talk into your phone and say, you know what, I just had this thought. And I just had this feeling. And I know I'm going to forget it. So I'm going to talk it into the phone. You can tell your dreams in the phone. It's an easy way. So that you catch yourself along the way of your life.
And I'd like to continue talking about the intellectual structure you've built for working with folks. I'm orienting a little bit towards the direct practical because I think an answer would be really interesting for me and for the audience. So just one more on the practical side. When you talk about dreams, journaling, mindfulness, or just awareness of what's happening at work, in relationships, which are likely and perhaps patterns, what do you do with that hard drive of information? Someone like you would be really good to work with as an analyst. If they're not yet working with an analyst like you, what can someone do with 5 dreams or 10 recordings or half a year of journaling? I think I know your answer, but tell me because I don't want to assume it.
I would say we all have defenses. You can't really get to yourself by yourself. We are relational beings. So we develop relationally, and we learn about ourselves relationally. So I, of course, am biased. So I would say, find a place to do some real serious inner work. If you can't, if you don't, if you need to defend against it, do your journals. Pay attention to your dreams. Write them down. See what you come up with. Let yourself explore a little bit. Spend some time each day or however much, as you said, be mindful. Pay attention to what you love. Pay attention to what makes you feel good. Pay attention. It's not just on the negative side. Watch out for what gives you joy. What gives you motivation, inspiration. Write it down. So many people take it for granted. Don't take it for granted. And don't take yourself for granted. And really value your life. So if somebody with small things, but really with big things as well. So if you like flowers, make sure you have flowers. It's a simple thing. It bolsters the personality. And quite truly, I don't think you can get anywhere just analyzing it. There's my bias.
No, it may be your bias, but you hear it in many fields. Physician, heal thyself. Why are physicians smoking more than the average individual? Think about that. You probably could give a good answer, but so I'm with you. So fine. So do the work, start doing the self-reflection, mindfulness. It will bring up some thoughts, ideas, but also set aside a corner, a container with someone else, because otherwise what are we doing? All right.
Exactly. Let me just add to that.
Please.
You said it very well, which is that the somebody else is not going to really work as your partner and your friend. Because we just can't do that. But find someone that you really feel you resonate with and would understand you quite deeply, and just see where you go without necessarily an end or an idea, but I want to know myself. And that's a great goal.
I love it. And I think this would be an awesome place to stop. I do want to ask you a couple more questions though, because it's interesting. How do you, and I'm going to go one more practical with folks who can't, this might is likely a belief too, but can't afford it or simply say they don't have the time, can't hire someone. How do they feel better without the help of someone else? I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that maybe they don't have the time and the money because it isn't time for them to do it. Start on doing some good things for yourself. Making a journal, dreams, like I had said, make some notes, surround yourself with good energy, and do what you can. But maybe if you can't do it now, make it an idea for making more money to be able to do it. Making time, everyone's got time. So
Everyone's got time. Yeah, I like that. Thank you. That's really good. And I guess maybe the last piece, first we'll get to where people can find you, but when someone calls you, what can they expect as a first session, and how many sessions do you work with people, and can you maybe touch on how your services work for folks, and then we'll talk about where they could find you.
Okay. The first session is very similar to every session. It is, where are you? And what are you looking for? Okay, so that's basically, and we just go and evolve wherever the person wants to go. How long it takes is up to each individual. Everybody is different. I never say X amount of times. I want to listen to what they are listening to. I will give my opinion if I think it's too short, but I also honor very much where somebody is.
Perfect. Really helpful. And it sounds like it's an open-ended, iterative, growing process, which tracks with everything you've said prior. With that said, Susan, would you please tell folks where they can find you, whether it be online or otherwise?
Yes.
And we'll also link those in the notes.
Thank you very much. You can find me on www.susanswartz, SCHWARTZ, PhD.com. It's my website. On it is my text, phone, address, all the numbers, and you can always get a hold of me, for sure.
Awesome. Do you work with people outside of Arizona? Is that kosher and okay? Yeah.
I'll tell you, all over the world now because of Zoom. So Zoom has opened our world immensely and made possible for people who couldn't to be able to. So it's been wonderful in many ways.
And you've seen that. And okay, I'll turn on the recording kind of 1, 2, 3. Thank you, Susan, for giving your website and your phone number there and your addresses there. And folks should also know that they can see you outside of Arizona, no matter where they are in the world, via Zoom. So they can know that as well. And we'll put that in the notes. Susan Swartz, thank you so much. It was so interesting. I think we'll have to do a second one. And take care. Thanks again.
Thank you, Alex. It was my pleasure.